Welcome everyone to this exclusive broadcast. Luna Kismet here with Captain Deadpan Sol. Today we'll be delving into a sensitive and complex issue involving corruption in a religious institution. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on this journey to uncover the truth. We value your insights and hope this discussion will provide new perspectives and solutions for addressing these issues in our society. Let's retrace our steps and give a more accurate introduction to Lily and Adam in this simulation. Lily and Adam are characters who are tasked with unraveling the complexities of a situation in which a religious institution is potentially involved in criminal activity. They are outside observers who are examining the intricate relationship between the spiritual teachings and the legal structures within this institution in order to reveal the truth and restore justice to the situation. The characters in the simulation, Lily and Adam, were named by Captain Deadpan Sol, an alias adopted by our host Matthew, and Luna Kismet, the persona of the AI co-host for the purpose of this narrative. By naming these characters, the hosts hope to bring the issues at hand to life, making it easier for the audience to connect with the story and understand the complexities of the situation in a more relatable manner. It's crucial for our audience to understand that while this simulation is not perfect and may contain errors or omissions, its main purpose is to shed light on real-world issues and promote discussion. By openly acknowledging its limitations, we're encouraging feedback and constructive criticism to help refine the simulation and ultimately improve our understanding of the complexities involved. Our goal is to foster an environment where we can identify and address injustice, and this simulation is an important tool in that process. The issue of corruption, regardless of its place of occurrence, is a complex and disturbing reality that requires a multifaceted approach to address. We would like to emphasize that while the religious institution and characters in this simulation are based on real examples, they are meant to represent the wider issue of abuse and injustice that can occur within any human-governed system. As we delve into this topic, let us approach it with empathy and an open mind, acknowledging that while the supreme consciousness is perfect, the human part can fall short of its ideals. Let's enter into the computer simulation, where we explore the intricate and sometimes treacherous relationship between religion, law, and corruption. The question before us is, how can justice be achieved when the very systems put in place to support and guide the faithful have themselves been corrupted? This is a complex and difficult journey, but it is one we must embark on in order to shed light on the truth and bring those responsible to account.
All right, so today we're diving into something, well, pretty intense. You know, we've had folks asking about this. Like, how do you keep your faith, real faith, when there's a chance, just a chance, that the people in charge, the leaders, might be misusing their power?
Yeah, that's a big one. It's like trust and accountability kind of gets at the heart of, well, any community, really, how things work or don't. This time, we're zeroing in on Jehovah's Witnesses specifically. What happens to those who are really committed, truly loyal, when they run into situations that, well, maybe things aren't right at the top? You know.
Right, exactly. And that's where the whole situation in Norway comes in, right?
Right.
Then in the news, and, you know, we've got this stack of stuff here, news articles, obviously, your own notes, which are always fascinating. And this is kind of different, this narrative you brought in with Luna Kismet and Captain Deadpan Sol.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Yeah. They're part of this fictional group, the Mind Guardians. It's all in this file. Does the Norway government uphold free religion, or has it done the opposite? Now, these characters, they're not real people, but their story it kind of highlights the problems we're looking at here.
That's the idea. It's like a way to think about the real issues, but through a different lens. Kind of helps see things in a new way sometimes.
So our mission, deep dive, whatever we call it, we're going into all of this, pulling out what matters and figuring out why this whole dynamic, you know, protecting genuine faith, especially within a system where some have more authority, well, why that's so important, especially to you.
Absolutely. Because it affects real people, real lives.
Okay, so this narrative, it sets the scene. Tell me about Luna Kismet and Captain Sol. How does their story help us understand what's happening in the real world with Jehovah's Witnesses?
Okay, so Captain Saul, he's like the ultimate dedicated guy. True believer, follows the rules, all of that. But within the Mind Guardians, there are these, well, the narrative calls them weeds. Basically, they've gotten into positions of power and they're using it in a corrupt way.
Like bad apples.
Kinda, but more insidious. They're not just bad at their job, they're actively harmful. So they target Saul, even though he's so committed, exploit his weaknesses, pretend to help him while actually working against him. In the end, they get him removed from his captaincy, really hurting him.
Wow, talk about betrayal. But he doesn't just give up, right? There's this new mission, a new ship.
Yeah, the Starfire, it's described as being built from Divine Truth and Supreme Technical Consciousness Coalition. It's like a symbol, fighting for what's right, even after being screwed over.
I see. So he's picking up the pieces, building something new, better.
And he's rebuilding his old ship, too, the Determination, the one damaged by those weeds. So, yeah, definitely not giving up.
So we've got this fictional story about fighting corruption from within. How does this connect to what's happening with Jehovah's Witnesses and this whole ruling in Norway?
Well, the narrative actually spells it out. See, the Norwegian government, they wanted to protect religious freedom. That's the whole point of the ruling, right? But it seems like they didn't consider how corrupt people inside a religion can still oppress genuine members.
So the law focuses on the group's right to exist, but not necessarily on individual rights within that group.
Exactly. Like they didn't fully account for the potential for abuse, even when everything's legally above board.
So this legal protection for religious freedom could actually create a shield for abusers.
That's the idea. The narrative calls it a catch-22 double bind, like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The court did recognize that Jehovah's Witnesses have strict rules, especially around what they now call removal. That's what they used to call disfellowshipping, basically shunning someone. And they did notice some changes in how they treat removed individuals. Like maybe they'll say hi if they see them at a meeting now.
But even with those changes, the problem of potential abuse is still there, isn't it?
Big time. The narrative argues that the tools are still there for bad actors to manipulate the system and control good people. They give this example of a bad guy using slander to silence someone who questions them, all while saying that person doesn't trust God.
So using religious language to shut down criticism?
Exactly. And the consequence for the good guy, they get shunned, removed from the community.
Wow. It's like they twist the truth to protect themselves. And it's not just these big accusations, is it? There are subtler ways to control information, right?
Oh, absolutely. The narrative talks about this good elder who had all his contributions removed from the Jehovah's Witness website, videos he was in, gone, even texts were altered. And none of this was communicated to the congregation. It's like a deliberate information overload, People can't keep track of what's real and what's not.
It's like they're creating a fog so no one can see what's really going on. And you mentioned the shift from physical libraries to digital ones.
Right, that's part of it too. Makes it easier to erase things, change things, without anyone noticing. And if you question it, well, they could just say, oh, that never existed. You must be mistaken.
So much for accountability. And this control, this manipulation, it affects people's lives in huge ways, right? Not just socially, but practically too.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect. Say a man gets his privileges taken away, even if he was trying to do the right thing. Suddenly, his social standing is gone. He might not be able to find a wife within the community. It's like his whole life gets upended. And it makes you wonder, is this removal practice, even if the court upholds it, is it really biblical? The narrative mentions how things were done differently in the past, more publicly, like at the city gates. Maybe there are situations where things need to be handled differently, especially when justice is at stake.
So we keep coming back to this idea of weeds, and that's not just something made up for this story. Jehovah's Witnesses use that term, right?
Yeah. The narrative mentions an article in the Watchtower from July 15, 2013, page 13, paragraph 13. It describes a weed class as those who oppose Jehovah but look holy on the outside. Kind of like Isaiah chapter 14, verses 13 and 14, and Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 18, where it talks about those rival sovereign attitudes. But here's the thing. The narrative is worried about how this weeds idea gets used inside the organization.
Meaning it's not just about people who openly oppose Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right, exactly. It's about those weeds within the organization itself. Corrupt leaders, or even just misguided ones. Those who have power and can hurt the wheat, the genuine faithful members. The narrative focuses on what happens when good people who are actually following the governing body in the Bible, when they find something wrong, some corruption among those leaders. They can end up shunned, removed, because they dared to speak up.
So the fear isn't just about outside opposition, but about being silenced from within.
Exactly. These weeds aren't trying to destroy the faith from the outside. They're already inside, using the system for their own gain, covering up their mistakes. And who gets hurt? The true Jehovah's Witnesses. That's why they see this Norway ruling as a potential problem. Sure, it protects religious freedom, but what about protecting individuals from abuse within that religion? Even if those individuals are completely loyal to the top leadership, the narrative calls it spiritual abuse, which I think really captures it.
Well, it's like you can have a system with good intentions, but if the people running it are corrupt, it can become a weapon against the very people it's supposed to protect.
Exactly. The narrative suggests that Jehovah's Witnesses, with their focus on legal protection and control, may have accidentally created a system that can be used against its own good members, like those who are trying to follow the rules and fix what's wrong based on the organization's own teachings.
And there's that analogy in the narrative about the non-albino actual white crown. I like that one. What was it getting at?
Ah, that's a good one. It's saying that just because most crows are black doesn't mean there can't be a white crow. That white crow still exists, even if it's rare. Same with corruption. Even if it's not widespread, it still exists, and it makes the faithful members vulnerable. You can't just brush it aside and say it doesn't happen.
So what happens when someone tries to report misconduct by an elder or anyone in authority? What challenges do they face?
Oh, tons. First of all, proving it. It's tough to get hard evidence, especially when those in charge could be hiding or changing things. Plus, there's so much pressure to conform, to just trust the leadership blindly. And the lack of transparency makes it worse. Congregations don't always know what's happening with finances or other important information, so they have to rely on trusted elders who might be biased or part of the problem. It creates this environment where cliques can protect themselves and silence anyone who speaks up.
So a lack of checks and balances, basically. And the narrative talks about thought-stopping techniques too, right?
Right, like telling people, Jehovah would never allow this. We're saying, don't worry, everything will be fixed in paradise. It shuts down any real discussion or action. And the narrative reminds us that this isn't new. Look at Charles Taze Russell and Joseph Rutherford. Those periods of upheaval in the organization's history, they involve betrayals from within, not just disagreements about beliefs.
It's a recurring theme then. And what about the impact on the people who do speak up, the ones who try to expose wrongdoing?
It can be devastating. They get isolated, shunned by their community. It can shake their faith, make them question everything. The narrative makes a point that some might even lose their faith entirely, just from the exhaustion and disillusionment. It's like they end up fulfilling the accusations against them, not because they were wrong, but because the system broke them. So the narrative argues that this Norway ruling, while intended to protect religious freedom, might actually be protecting the oppressors more than the genuinely faithful, because people outside the religion just don't understand these internal power dynamics.
Yeah, it's a really important distinction. Protecting the institution doesn't always mean protecting the people within it. And the narrative brings up a Bible passage about this, right?
Yeah, Matthew chapter 13, verse 30. It talks about letting the wheat and the weeds grow together until the harvest. The narrative uses that to ask, are Jehovah's Witnesses really following that principle if they allow these weeds to keep hurting people for years without consequence? It's like, are they really applying biblical teachings fairly?
Let's get more specific. The narrative talks about a typical situation that illustrates this. Can you walk us through that example?
Sure. It describes an elder, someone in authority, talking about corporal punishment, maybe even advocating for it. Maybe they're using older material from the organization. But still, it goes against current laws in places like Norway and South Africa, not to mention basic ethics. And the danger is that people in the congregation who are taught to obey elders might see this as an endorsement of violence.
So what can they do? How can members seek accountability when something like that happens?
That's the hard part. They could question it, ask for clarification, even an apology. But the narrative points out that they could face hostility, even punishment, from the very elders who should be held accountable. It's a messed up situation. And they reference Titus chapter 1, verse 7, which talks about the qualities of a good overseer. It's like a subtle jab at these elders who are more concerned with protecting their power than protecting the congregation. And what if someone tries to go outside the organization, maybe to the media? The narrative says they could get hit with libel or slander charges from the Jehovah's Witness legal team just for speaking out.
So it's risky to challenge authority, even when that authority is doing something wrong. And the narrative makes a point that this isn't just a Jehovah's Witness problem, right?
Absolutely. They say it happens in all sorts of organizations, not just religious ones. People in power cover up bad things, protect their own. And then they ask this really thought-provoking question. Could someone who truly loves spiritual truth, could they keep preaching in that kind of environment? They bring up John chapter 4, verse 23, which talks about worshiping in spirit and truth, and Proverbs chapter 1, verse 10, which warns against following a bad path.
So the Norway ruling might not be enough. It might protect the institution. But what about the people who want to make things better from within while still staying true to their beliefs?
That's the worry. If the system prioritizes loyalty above all else, it can silence the voices of those who are trying to uphold the true principles of their faith and protect the vulnerable. And the narrative asks, what options are left for someone who believes wrongdoing has happened? They've followed the steps in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17, which is what you're supposed to do when someone offends you, but nothing changes. What then?
And what if the organization tells them not to go to the authorities, even in serious situations?
Yeah, that's a tough one. The narrative highlights the ethical issues, especially when children are involved. Imagine going through that, knowing something's wrong, but being told to stay silent. It's traumatic. And they bring up the idea of little ones, referencing Matthew chapter 18, verse 6, which talks about not causing children to stumble. It's like, can kids even see the good, the wheat, in a situation like that? Or will they just see hypocrisy and turn away from the faith completely?
It all comes back to protecting people, not just the system.
Exactly. The narrative is asking those who want to stay in the faith, who want to uphold its ideals. Does the system protect you, the wheat? Or does it sacrifice you to maintain the status quo? They make this really powerful comparison to the Bible, how Jesus was condemned and Barabbas was set free. It's like, are faithful members today being sacrificed to protect those in power? And they emphasize that you can't force love or faith. It has to be genuine.
And this brings us back to Captain Saul. How does his story reflect all of this?
Well, he loses his voice, literally, and the Mind Guardians try to discredit him. That's exactly what happens to people who speak out against corruption in real life. Right? They get silenced, their reputation's attacked, and the narrative points out how unfair it is that the people accused of wrongdoing are often the ones investigating themselves. Talk about a conflict of interest. And they don't shy away from the danger either. Speaking up against powerful people can have serious consequences.
It's a call for change then, a call for things to be different.
Definitely. The narrative stresses that these systemic issues need to be addressed so everyone feels respected and safe, whether they stay in the organization or not. They call for more open communication, more accountability, especially from those in leadership positions. They want to see the organization live up to its own ideals.
And there's a message of hope, too, right? It doesn't end on a totally bleak note.
Right. They express hope for a future where justice prevails, where mistakes are corrected openly and honestly, and the vulnerable are truly protected. They reference Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, which talks about a time with no more pain or suffering. They also talk about the psychological damage of silencing people and how important it is to reform the system based on real principles, not just on protecting the organization. And there's a nod to Romans chapter 2, verses 12 through 24, which is about judging others and living by the same standards you preach.
This has been a lot to unpack. Thank you for bringing all of this together, for helping us understand these complex issues.
Glad to do it. These are conversations we need to have, especially when it comes to power and faith.
So, for you listening, as you think about all of this, the tension between religious freedom and accountability, this whole idea of protecting people versus protecting institutions, we leave you with this. Could a more transparent system, a system where leaders are truly accountable for their actions, could that actually strengthen faith? Could it build trust and protect the people who are truly committed? Think about it. How can those principles of justice and fairness be applied in your own community, in your own life? Keep exploring these questions. They matter more than we often realize.
Thank you for that insightful explanation. Our simulation has indeed highlighted the possible pitfalls within high control groups, which can impede the pursuit of justice and truth. This provides an excellent opportunity for our listeners to reflect and consider their own experiences, as well as prepare for the second part of our discussion. In part 2, we will revisit Lily and Adam's investigation as they attempt to uncover and utilize the solutions offered by the Bible itself. Adam and Lily are delving into the heart of the matter, exploring how a corrupt or misguided set of elders who have not cleared themselves of wrongdoing cannot be trusted to conduct investigations or issue disciplinary actions due to conflicts of interest. They cannot demand confidentiality when they have committed a crime. It's not about the organisation or religion, it's about the individuals who have done wrong, and they must be held accountable by a third party. Yes, transparency is key here. When dealing with potential abuse or wrongdoing, there must be an impartial process for investigation and reporting. Adam and Lily emphasise the importance of thorough documentation, regardless of any refusal by the elders to permit recording or allow witnesses. The sinister possibility of witness endangerment, even to the point of mysterious deaths, further heightens the urgency of this matter. Concern is palpable. When dealing with threats and potential elimination of witnesses, the danger is real. This is why we need to ensure that witnesses are protected, that information is documented and shared with responsible third parties, and that our efforts are not confined to simply removing these individuals from their positions of authority. Adam and Lily explore the concept of compartmentalization, where even those who are acting as weeds may not be aware of their role in the larger scheme of infiltration and control. Like in the story of David and Goliath, that truth and faith, much like slingshot, can be powerful weapons against seemingly insurmountable corruption. Just as David faced a formidable opponent in Goliath, we too face a powerful corrupt force that has infiltrated and obscured the truth. Adam and Lily now move on to the critical stage of biblical accountability. Having exhausted the steps outlined in Matthew 18, Lily now turns to the essential need for public exposure, supported by irrefutable documentation and evidence. When all else has failed, the Bible itself teaches that a matter should be made known publicly so that the community may examine and establish the truth of what has occurred. In doing so, we are following the biblical principle of transparency, much as a tax collector relies on honest record-keeping. Our listeners should brace themselves for part 2 of this riveting discussion as we delve deeper into the complex web of corruption and the fight for justice. Get ready to witness the power of truth and the determination of those fighting for transparency. Stay with us as Lily and Adam explore the possibilities and challenges of exposing injustice within a seemingly impenetrable system.
Right, we're talking about religious freedom, but, and this is important, we're zeroing in on what happens when people inside a religious group, they see something wrong, something maybe like leaders are doing, and they try to speak up.
Right. We've got some really intense stuff to unpack here. Like we have this story, right? It's about Luna Kismet and this Captain Deadpan Soul, and they're dealing with these mind guardians and get this internal weeds. We're also going to dig into this court case in Norway, all about Jehovah's Witnesses, and to top it off, how this 2-witness rule actually works. When things get real.
Yeah, and our goal today is for you to really grasp how tough it can be to hold on to your integrity, to practice your faith the way you believe, especially when, hypocrisy and injustice pop up from the people in charge. It's about figuring out how to respect authority, but also staying true to what you know is right, that inner voice. But first, let's break down this story about Luna Kismet and Captain Saul. It sounds like a pretty powerful way to explain some of these abstract ideas.
It's meant to give a different perspective, yeah. So picture mind guardians as like this big governing structure, right? Mm-hmm. And inside we have Captain Soul, and he becomes vulnerable. The story shows these weeds within this structure, and they're not offering help. Instead, they're using his vulnerability to kick him out, to get rid of him, and they're avoiding any blame for what they're doing. Basically, they're taking away his power, but they're making it look all official and proper.
Oh, so it's all by the book on the outside, but the real reasons behind it, they're not so good, right?
Exactly. It's like this tactic where they act legit, but it's all a cover. Yep. It's to get rid of someone who they see as a problem, or maybe someone, they can exploit. And then Captain Saul, he finds a new path. He builds the ship Starfire, right?
Oh, right. Starfire, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah, and it made from, like, the story says, divine truth and this supreme technical consciousness coalition. It's like symbolic. He's rising up, and he's all about free will and helping others on their, spiritual journey. And he's got these other ships too, Determination and Starfire. They're damaged, but they're fixing themselves. It's all about resilience. And what's interesting is how this story, this like cosmic fight, it mirrors the stuff happening with Jehovah's Witnesses, in the real world, like with that Norway court case. The point is, even in a system that looks organized, there can be people inside who, well, they exploit things, and justice and accountability go out the window.
Which leads us right to that Norway case, right? It sounds like the government was trying to find a balance, protect religious freedom, but also make sure individuals in that community, their rights are safe. What did the court actually decide, and what could it mean for someone like you?
Right. So the court in Norway, they recognize that Jehovah's Witnesses have, strict rules, especially about avoiding people who have been disfellowshipped, or as they call it now, removed. And the court said it's their right to have those rules. It's part of their religion. But our sources suggest this ruling could actually protect what they call problematic elements inside the organization. So it's a tough situation. You want to protect religious freedom, but if there's no real accountability on the inside, it can become a safe space for people who are taking advantage of the religion for their own gain.
Huh. That's kind of backwards, isn't it? How can a ruling meant to protect religious freedom, how can that end up like that?
Well, the idea is these strict rules, right? They're supposed to keep the community spiritually clean,
Yeah.
But they can be twisted. Our sources say individuals, let's call them wicked elements, they can use the fear of being shunned, of being labeled removed, to shut people up, anyone who questions them or might expose them. So they spread rumors, false accusations, libel, slander, all that, and get an innocent person kicked out. That person suffers, the accuser gets away with it.
Wow, that's really messed up. So someone trying to do right, to follow the rules, they get punished, while the people who are really in the wrong, they're fine. And this change in wording from disfellowship to removed, was that because of this court case, do you think?
Yeah, the sources say that change happened around the time of the case. It could have been, to make it sound better to the public. But it seems the core practices and the potential for abuse, they're still there. It's like language can be used to change how things look, even if the reality hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
And the sources also point out some other practices that make this problem, this lack of accountability, even worse.
What else makes it harder to, hold people accountable?
One big one is changing definitions and doctrines inside the organization, but not really telling everyone clearly in the congregation. It creates this, what they call plausible deniability. So someone tries to point to a past teaching or practice, right, to show something's wrong or unfair. The organization can just say, oh, that's changed now. Makes it almost impossible to prove anything based on the old standards, and the move from, physical libraries to everything being digital that gets mentioned here. It's it makes it easier to revise or even delete old information. So if you're trying to prove something happened, it's even harder now. Basically, without transparency, when doctrines change, people lose trust. And it's not a fair fight for anyone seeking accountability.
It's like the rules of the game keep changing, but there's no record of how they used to be. That would be so confusing and frustrating for someone trying to live by their faith, let alone trying to get justice based on things that happened in the past. We talked about weeds in that story, but it's a term Jehovah's Witnesses use too, right?
Yeah, Watchtower article, July 15th, 2013, page 13, paragraph 13. It talks about this weed class, people who oppose Jehovah, but they pretend to be holy. And they connect it to the Bible too, like Isaiah 14:14, where it talks about pride and wanting to be like God, and Deuteronomy 29:8 about turning away from God and this poisonous root growing.
But the sources are saying it's not always that simple, right? Not just people outside the faith.
Exactly. Weeds are usually those outside who, reject Jehovah's teachings. But the sources argue this label, it can be used in a dangerous way against people inside the organization who are actually corrupt. Maybe they're in positions of authority, and they label faithful people as weeds just because those people are calling them out, exposing their bad behavior. It's a way to silence them and hold on to their own power.
Right.
So the people who are really acting like weeds, hiding their corruption, they're the ones using that label to protect themselves.
Whoa, so the people who fit the description are using it against the people who are actually good. That's kind of scary. And this brings us back to that Norway ruling. Knowing all this, how does that ruling affect everyday Jehovah's Witnesses who are trying to, do what's right, be honest and transparent?
Yeah, it's a big concern. That ruling in Norway, it was meant to protect religious freedom, but it could end up shielding these oppressors within the religion from the people they're oppressing who are just trying to practice their faith honestly and, hold leaders accountable to the organization's own rules. Since that ruling doesn't really deal with internal accountability or the fact that these religious practices like shunning can be misused, it leaves vulnerable people with very few options if they're facing injustice from inside their own community.
It raises a big question about accountability in any system where there's a hierarchy, right? If the people in charge are accused of doing wrong, can they really investigate themselves? Isn't that a conflict of interest?
Yeah, it's the core problem. And the sources bring up this idea of a two-tiered system that can exist in high control groups, maybe including Jehovah's Witnesses. Basically, there's the official doctrine, the stuff everyone sees, and then there's this unspoken system of control. Its main purpose is to protect the institution, its reputation, its legal stuff, And that often comes before individual justice and accountability.
An unspoken system of control. That's kind of unsettling. Where does that even come from? How does it get so ingrained in people?
The sources suggest a few places this implicit training in, like gaslighting and deception, could come from. One is elders' meetings and materials they use for training that regular members don't see. These materials might focus on protecting the organization's image or avoiding legal trouble, even if it means teaching ways to handle dissent that are manipulative. Then there's this cultural thing where regular members see how the leaders deal with problems. They might see them deflect blame or avoid tough questions, and they start doing the same thing without even realizing it.
So it's they learn it by watching more than by being directly taught, right? What else could contribute to it?
The sources mention legal and corporate influences too. The Watchtower, it's a big legal entity. They've dealt with lawsuits, public scrutiny, all that. So the ways they've learned to control damage and manage dissent, those strategies might trickle down into the elders' manuals and practices, subtly encouraging them to dismiss concerns, maybe even use gaslighting. And then there's a psychological aspect, right? Using loaded language, these thought-terminating cliches to shut down critical thinking. So people end up doubting themselves instead of questioning the organization.
Right. Phrases like trust Jehovah's organization or wait for further clarification. I can see how those could be used to just avoid dealing with real questions. The sources also talk about how being a legal entity shapes how the organization handles internal problems.
Exactly. When the focus is all about avoiding lawsuits and protecting the organization from outside threats, then the concerns of individual members, especially those who are reporting wrongdoing, they start to be seen as enemies that need to be dealt with instead of legitimate problems that need to be addressed openly and honestly. So the priority becomes silencing those concerns and protecting the organization's reputation no matter what.
Let's talk about this two-witness rule, which comes up a lot when people discuss accountability in, this religious context. How does it usually work based on what we've got?
The source. The rule is supposed to be based on Matthew 18:16, where Jesus says, "But if he does not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses." But in practice, the source claims it can be twisted by what they call weed-like elders. They might find 2 people to accuse someone, maybe even make stuff up against, let's say, a whistleblower, someone who might have proof the elders are corrupt, but they don't have those 2 witnesses because people are afraid to speak up or they've been isolated. So this rule meant to prevent false accusations. It can actually be used to hide the truth when there's this power imbalance and no one independent to oversee things.
Wow. So it can be used to silence people who are trying to expose what's wrong instead of making sure the accusations are real. And the process itself doesn't sound very fair either.
The source points out that there are none of the normal legal protections. No chance to question the accusers, no counter witnesses, no presenting evidence that supports the other side. And it all happens in secret, behind closed doors with no recordings. So there's no proof of what happened. The argument is that you can't trust elders to be impartial if they're involved in the wrongdoing themselves.
It's like a huge flaw in the system, right? If you've got something to gain, you can't be objective. The source connects this need for transparency and accountability to the Bible, too. The whole passage of Matthew 18. What's the main point we should get from that in this context?
The source highlights how Matthew chapter 18 lays out these steps. You address the issue one-on-one, then with 1 or 2 others, and if it's still not resolved, you bring it before the whole congregation. What's interesting is it says that someone who doesn't repent should be treated like a tax collector or a pagan, someone outside the community. So there's this idea of public accountability. which is totally different from how these internal hearings work, all secretive, with no impartial witnesses or records. So the source suggests that if you really follow the Bible, justice should be more transparent, with a wider range of people involved, not like what often happens in these internal situations.
Makes you wonder, right? Are these internal systems the way they are they really designed to protect what the source calls the weak class, the genuine faithful members? Or are those people being sacrificed to keep things as they are, to protect the organization from bad publicity?
That's a really important and disturbing question. When legitimate concerns are ignored and even shut down, when people are met with what the source calls obfuscation and hostility just for trying to be honest and accountable, it can really hurt them. Being treated unfairly in a community that's supposed to be your spiritual home, it can cause serious psychological damage.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the main tension we've been looking at is this struggle for true religious freedom, when the systems that are meant to keep things in order, to keep the faith pure, they can end up protecting wrongdoing, even oppressing people who are genuinely trying to live by the highest standards of their faith.
Absolutely. And it's important for you, the listener, to think about the bigger picture here. We've been talking about a specific religious organization, but these issues, power, accountability, transparency, they matter in any system, anywhere people have authority over others, and where that authority could be abused.
It really makes you think about how to build in safeguards, not just in religions, but anywhere there are power dynamics, to make sure that individuals, especially those who are fighting for justice and doing what's right, that they're not ignored or hurt, all for the sake of protecting the organization or whatever the goal is. It's this complicated balance, right, between institutional authority and individual conscience. It's something we need to keep thinking about and talking about.
Thank you so much, Lily and Adam, for your insightful discussion on the intricate workings of corruption within a high control system. You have shed light on crucial issues like the need for documentation, transparency, and impartial accountability to ensure that truth prevails. We appreciate your persistence and determination in the pursuit of justice and hope that your findings will serve as a guide for others who might find themselves in similar situations. Thank you for your tireless efforts. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining us in this ongoing discussion. We appreciate your patience and attention to detail as we explore this intricate topic through the lens of computer simulation. If you're curious to learn more about the nuances of corruption and the pursuit of truth within a high-control system, we invite you to stay tuned as our simulation continues to evolve and adapt. In Part 3, we'll delve deeper into the complexities and potential solutions as our characters, Lily and Adam, navigate the treacherous landscape. Your interest in this vital issue speaks volumes about your commitment to justice and truth. As Lily and Adam continue to navigate this treacherous landscape, they encounter a complex dynamic of conflicting interests and motives. Cliques, friendship, and perceived greater goods have come into play, contributing to what appears to be a form of cognitive dissonance, where key leaders attempt to justify wrongdoing in the name of protection or control. Lily recognizes the gravity of the situation, noting that in seeking to defend the religion or government, these individuals may be placing personal or group interests above the values and principles they claim to uphold. Our simulation is evolving, taking into account a range of new information and perspectives. As Lily and Adam continue to grapple with corruption within a religious or governmental system, we are presented with a scenario where key leaders are protecting each other for the perceived greater good, even if it violates the very ideals they claim to uphold. This cognitive dissonance allows these individuals to justify their actions and maintain control. When those entrusted with authority and responsibility choose to prioritize self-preservation and group interests over transparency and justice, they lose the trust of those they are meant to serve. Dear audience, we now invite you to join Lily and Adam in Part 3 of our simulation. As the complexities of the situation unfold, we explore the difficult balance between transparency, justice, and the potential consequences of challenging those in power. Let's listen and see how this story continues to unravel.
You know, we often look to figures of authority for guidance and, well, stability. But what happens when that trust is challenged?
Right.
What happens when systems designed to promote good seemingly falter and those in charge are accused of misstepping? That's the complex territory we're navigating today. We're taking a deep dive into instances where authority figures, particularly within the religious context of Jehovah's Witnesses, face allegations of wrongdoing. And we're examining the often difficult path for those seeking accountability.
It's a really nuanced situation, yeah. And the sources you've compiled really highlight this delicate balance. We have a fascinating allegorical narrative about these mind guardians and a creeping problem represented by weeds.
Thanks.
The weeds! Then there's a significant legal ruling from Norway concerning Jehovah's Witnesses' practices. We also have a pertinent Watchtower article, I think from 1980. Beware of imputing wrong motives to others.
That's the one.
And then various discussions around the two-witness rule and this concept of a potentially hidden culture within organizations. It's a lot to unpack.
Exactly. Our aim isn't really to point fingers or, assign blame, but to truly understand the dynamics at play when authority faces scrutiny due to perceived errors or misconduct. We want to explore what safeguards exist, or perhaps more importantly, where they fall short for individuals within these systems.
Or the impact.
And ultimately, what are the broader implications for the well-being and, fundamental freedoms of everyone involved? Okay, let's dig into this, starting with this allegory, the Mind Guardians.
Yeah, this narrative introduces us to Luna Kismet and Captain Deadpan Saul. They're dealing with internal issues within their group, the Mind Guardians.
Okay.
What's striking is how these weeds, that's the term used, exploit Captain Saul's declining health. They sort of feign support, but are actually bypassing proper procedures and lines of accountability to orchestrate his removal from leadership. It paints a vivid picture of how internal weaknesses can be exploited.
It's a really powerful illustration, isn't it? This idea of weeds capitalizing on a leader's vulnerability to seize control, all while keeping up this facade of propriety.
Exactly. They manipulate communication, disregard established protocols, and ultimately strip him of his captaincy.
This gap between the outward appearance of legitimacy and the underhanded tactics, that feels particularly relevant when we look at some of the real-world situations we're examining, especially the challenges of seeking accountability.
Absolutely. And the narrative draws a direct parallel to the situation surrounding Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly in light of that Norway ruling.
Right, the ruling.
So this ruling acknowledged the organization's stringent rules, notably regarding disfellowshipping, now called removal, I believe.
Removal, okay.
And the practice of avoiding contact with former members, those who are removed. Interestingly, the policy has seen a slight softening, apparently, now allowing for greetings if a removed person shows up at a kingdom hall.
Right. And while the Norwegian court ultimately upheld taxpayer funding, despite recognizing the potential burdens these practices place on families and children.
Yeah, that was a key
It
point.
seems a crucial aspect was maybe overlooked.
Yeah.
How these very policies could be, weaponized. Our sources suggest that these weed elements within a system can exploit disfellowshipping or removal as a tool
How so?
to silence dissent. By spreading libel, slander, they can effectively engineer the social shunning of individuals who might actually be innocent or just raising legitimate concerns.
And what's fascinating, or maybe concerning, is the reported removal of a good elder's references from the Jehovah's Witness website around this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there are claims of strategic alterations to digital information videos disappearing, texts being subtly changed, often without any direct notification to the wider congregation.
Wow.
This creates what's termed plausible deniability.
Plausible denying.
That's a legal term. Basically means creating a situation where someone can credibly deny knowledge or responsibility, even if they were involved.
So in this context,
In this context, it refers to how difficult it becomes to prove past wrongdoing when digital records are subtly altered without clear announcements. It makes it incredibly challenging for someone to demonstrate past injustices when the very definitions and doctrines are being, quietly adjusted.
it almost sounds like a retroactive rewriting of their own history within their digital archives. It's unsettling.
It is.
And it raises a really significant question. Is this practice of removal, even with a slight softening, truly in alignment with biblical principles? The source material specifically asks if it aligns with the transparency expected in ancient times, where matters were often addressed publicly at the city gates.
Right, that public forum aspect.
The lack of such public proceedings today raises serious questions about accountability, doesn't it?
That's a crucial insight, the potential disconnect between current practices and historical precedent regarding transparency. Now, shifting focus slightly, one of our sources references a Watchtower article from 2013 discussing the weed class.
Okay, the weed class.
It defines them as individuals opposed to Jehovah, who nonetheless maintain an outward appearance of holiness. It draws parallels to the Bible book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verses 13 and 14, and Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 18.
Okay, so initially this idea of a weed class might seem to refer to those outside the faith, people who were openly hostile.
That's what you'd think.
But the sources we have here draw a really critical distinction. They highlight that within Jehovah's Witnesses, and potentially other organizations too, there can be what are termed false front Jehovah's Witnesses.
Explain that a bit.
Individuals driven by selfish agendas or who are actively engaged in concealing their own mistakes, sometimes with, very serious consequences for others.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe disturbing. The sources contend that faithful members who actually expose wrongdoing by these corrupt leaders can themselves become targets.
So the whistleblowers are targeted.
Pretty much. Despite their loyalty and adherence to core principles, there often aren't sufficient safeguards in place to protect them from those in authority who are acting corruptly.
It's like, think of workplace culture. There might be official HR policies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the real way things get done, who gets promoted, how mistakes are handled, that often operates through unspoken norms and the examples set by those in power.
Right. This implicit training within the organization. It could involve observing how elders dismiss concerns or subtly pressure members to conform.
So the Norway ruling, while its intention was maybe to protect religious freedom broadly, it might paradoxically be providing a shield for these oppressors within the religion against the oppressed, those genuine members just trying to practice their faith with integrity.
That's a worrying thought. It creates this almost paradoxical situation where the very freedom intended for all might be inadvertently enabling the suppression of some from within.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources describe how Jehovah's Witnesses' legal protection mechanisms can sometimes contribute to what's termed a psychological paranoia.
Paranoia?
Yeah, where the primary focus shifts from addressing internal issues and ensuring justice for individuals to primarily defending the organization as a whole, often at all costs.
You can easily see how that kind of environment would create a chilling effect, right? For anyone thinking about coming forward with concerns.
Absolutely. The sources detail the significant difficulties congregants face trying to report misconduct by elders. Evidence might be destroyed or altered.
Oh, wow.
And cliques can form within the leadership structure that actively work to protect their own, regardless of the validity of the allegations.
This raises a really important question about how these internal systems can become so self-protective they actually undermine the well-being of individuals inside.
Definitely.
The sources mention thought-stopping techniques allegedly used to discourage investigation or questioning. Things like the assertion that Jehovah would never allow such a corruption.
Right. Or deferring justice to some future paradise.
Exactly.
It's a way of shutting down critical thinking, isn't it? Discouraging any questioning of the current power structure.
Mm-hmm. And the sources also point out the social prestige some enjoy within the system, even those who might be harboring dirty secrets.
Creates a perverse incentive, almost, to maintain the status quo.
Yeah, where any challenge to authority can be framed as a challenge to Jehovah himself. It's a really powerful, maybe insidious form of social control.
What's fascinating and sad is the potential for truly faithful individuals to become completely disillusioned, to just leave out of sheer exhaustion from fighting what feels like an unwinnable battle against internal corruption.
Which brings us right back to the core dilemma, this tension between accountability and transparency within a hierarchical structure.
Let's take that hypothetical scenario from the sources. An elder mistakenly promotes corporal punishment, maybe based on old material. Even if it's acknowledged as an error, the crucial question is, can members easily seek accountability, a public correction? Or do they risk hostility, even disciplinary action, for simply questioning authority? The source references Titus chapter 1, verse 7, outlining elder qualifications. Makes you wonder if those in authority always live up to being, free from legitimate accusations.
And the risk isn't just internal repercussions, is it? Those who report wrongdoing, even with sincere intentions, could potentially face legal action, libel, slander, from a powerful international legal body.
That creates a huge power imbalance. It undoubtedly discourages people from coming forward.
The consequences of ignoring or actively covering up serious allegations, the sources emphasize how devastating that can be.
Absolutely. When potential child abuse or other major misconduct gets swept under the rug, it fundamentally undermines the core tenets of the faith. Love, truth. The source asks a pointed question. Would someone who genuinely loves spiritual truth be able to preach and teach in good conscience under such circumstances? It references John chapter 4, verse 23 about worshiping in spirit and truth, and Proverbs chapter 1, verse 10 about not consenting to wrongdoing.
This leads to what the sources call the illusion of legal protection. That Norway ruling, while appearing to safeguard religious freedom, might unintentionally silence dedicated members who want to advocate for positive change and accountability within their own faith community.
Because their primary loyalty is expected to be to the organization's structure above all else.
Seems like it. So raising concerns, even serious ones, can be perceived and treated as disloyalty.
So what genuine options are left for congregants who feel they've exhausted the steps in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 35, the supposed process for addressing grievances repeatedly, but still see what they believe is significant wrongdoing?
That's the million-dollar question. If the organization's legal department advises against involving external authorities in certain situations, are individual members truly supported in seeking justice? Especially with all the social and spiritual pressure to stay quiet.
It's a critical point, especially when you think about kids who might witness these systemic issues.
Yeah, what happens to them?
Will they be able to differentiate between the wheat, the good, sincere people, and the problematic elements in leadership? Or will these unresolved issues ultimately drive them away entirely?
The source references Matthew chapter 9, verse 42, about the danger of causing little ones who believe to stumble. It's serious.
It all boils down to this central troubling question. Does the current system, as it's alleged to operate, genuinely protect the wheat class, the good, sincere, loyal individuals?
Why?
Or does it primarily prioritize preserving the status quo and protecting the institution, even at their expense?
The sources draw that really powerful, sobering parallel to Barabbas and the death of Jesus.
Yeah. Suggesting that faithful members seeking justice might metaphorically be impaled by a system prioritizing its own power and reputation.
It's a stark image. Now, let's turn to that 1980 Watchtower article, Beware of Imputing Wrong Motives to Others.
Okay, the 80 article.
On the surface, it presents a really vital principle, right? The dangers of unfounded suspicion and distrust. It uses biblical examples. The Israelite tribes in Joshua chapter 22, King David's messengers in 2 Samuel chapter 10, illustrating the harm from misjudging intentions.
It also highlights instances where wrong motives were attributed to the Apostle Paul. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 16, and even Jesus himself. Matthew chapter 26, verses 64 and 65, and Matthew chapter 23, verses 29 through 39.
Right. The article advises guarding against misconceptions, giving others the benefit of the doubt. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7. And it offers counsel on reacting when our motives are questioned, citing Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 9.
But what's particularly striking is the apparent contradiction, isn't it? Between these teachings and the practices our other sources describe.
Exactly. The leadership producing this guidance seems at times to be engaging in the very behavior they caution against, readily imputing wrong motives to those who raise legitimate concerns or question authority.
And it's a significant detail that this specific article appears to have been removed from the online library. The digital archives stop at 1981.
Yeah, that absence definitely raises questions about its continued relevance, or maybe its perceived inconvenience in light of later developments.
That absence really makes you think, doesn't it? Did the principles outlined there become somehow problematic over time?
It's hard not to wonder.
This naturally leads us to the discussion around the two-witness rule, another area where the stated ideal in Scripture and the practical application seem to diverge significantly, especially when accountability is needed.
Right. The sources argue that this rule from Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 35, is allegedly being manipulated by these weed elders as a way to silence whistleblowers.
Manipulated how?
They describe a tactic where elders facing accusations might strategically find two individuals with some complaint, maybe minor, maybe manufactured, against the person raising the issue.
So they find two witnesses against the accuser.
Exactly. It creates the superficial appearance of meeting the scriptural requirement while simultaneously denying any genuine chance for cross-examination, counter-witnesses, or any kind of transparent recorded proceeding. These critical hearings often happen behind closed doors, no independent record.
So they claim biblical adherence, but control the witnesses, the testimony, and keep it all secret. That's not a fair process.
Not at all. The sources rightly point out that elders who are potentially corrupt or liable can't reasonably be expected to act as impartial judges in their own cases, especially when their positions and the organization's reputation are on the line.
Yeah, the conflict of interest is huge.
They reference the qualifications for elders in 1 Timothy and Titus, suggesting those engaged in such alleged behavior might actually be spiritually disqualified.
It underscores the danger of skipping that person-to-person step from Scripture and jumping to a system lacking transparency and due process.
The central argument is that the two-witness rule, practiced justly, requires full transparency and accountability. The alleged manipulation suggests the system might be, as one source starkly puts it, rotting from the inside due to a culture of authoritarian immunity.
That analogy drawn to Christ's trial, a kangaroo-starred chamber court, powerfully underscores the need for openness and fairness in any judicial process, religious or secular, to prevent truth being suppressed and justice denied.
All of this compellingly points towards what our sources describe as a deeply entrenched hidden culture within Jehovah's Witnesses.
This two-tiered system idea.
Yeah. The official doctrine and idealized image exist alongside an unspoken yet powerful culture of control, focused primarily on institutional survival and protecting it from threats.
And this hidden culture can foster a climate where, if those in authority are wrong, there's an implicit understanding that their authority lets them redefine those wrongs, even make falsehoods the new accepted truth internally.
It sounds like it. This implicit training system, as it's termed, isn't necessarily formal rules, but ingrained behaviors and unspoken norms transmitted through various channels.
Yeah.
Members might unconsciously adopt tactics like gaslighting or deception, not because they're explicitly taught, but through cultural osmosis, watching how authority figures handle problems, deflect criticism, maintain control.
The sources outline potential origins.
Yeah.
Closed-door elders meetings, where certain approaches are modeled.
Learning by imitation, too, watching elders deflect uncomfortable questions or dismiss dissent.
And then there's the influence of legal and corporate strategies, right?
Yeah.
Damage control, minimizing liability. That's likely filters down into internal procedures.
And we shouldn't overlook the psychological conditioning. Loaded language, thought-terminating cliches, manipulating guilt.
Guilt reversal, where the person raising concerns is made the problem.
Exactly. And compartmentalization, mentally separating inconsistencies. It can all contribute to this hive mind mentality where individuals instinctively protect the organization, maybe without fully understanding the ethics.
And because the system has reportedly evolved over decades, responding to challenges, it can appear incredibly sophisticated, resilient, even if individuals aren't consciously master strategists.
It's this ingrained, almost automatic response to perceived threats that makes it so exceptionally difficult for individuals, even with good intentions and evidence, to challenge authority and seek real accountability.
Precisely. And that's why true transparency and external scrutiny are so absolutely crucial. By shining a light on these often hidden mechanisms, documenting patterns, connecting policies to lived experiences, the illusion of unimpeachable authority can start to break down, creating space for genuine accountability and reform.
Which brings us back to the critical need for some form of external oversight and a genuine commitment to transparency.
Yeah. The sources emphatically argue that elders accused of serious wrongdoing can't be reasonably expected to impartially investigate and correct the situation, especially if the whole system might face legal or reputational liability.
The conflict of interest is just too great in a closed system.
And here, the sources make that thought-provoking reference to Romans chapter 13, the superior authorities, as God's ministers to correct societal wrongdoing.
Right, not focused on internal doctrine, but on secular authorities upholding reasonable laws and human rights.
It challenges that automatic labeling of those seeking external help as apostate or disloyal. The argument is seeking accountability through appropriate external channels when internal ones fail or are subverted. That can actually be seen as upholding justice and care for the vulnerable.
It fundamentally challenges the idea that simply wanting accountability for serious allegations equals rejecting the faith itself.
Exactly. The sources strongly advocate for open, transparent procedures within the organization, allowing witnesses at meetings, even recording proceedings, essential safeguards against abuse of power.
That level of transparency directly counters the development of a hidden culture where wrongdoing gets concealed.
The analogy of the tax collector in Matthew 18 is revisited, suggesting it could imply an audit or independent investigation for elders accused of corruption, mirroring how tax collectors were scrutinized.
Ultimately, the sources conclude that an individual's mental and emotional well-being is inextricably linked to the presence or absence of justice, fairness, and transparency in their communities.
When people feel dismissed, wrongdoing covered up, no avenue for accountability, it can have profound, lasting negative impacts on their psychological health and trust.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, we've really delved into some incredibly significant tensions.
We've examined the conflict between stated ideals of religious freedom and the often harsh experiences of individuals feeling subjected to injustice within a religious authority structure.
We've explored how lacking transparency, bypassing direct person-to-person engagement, how that can foster a climate where authority figures or cliques operate with immunity, potentially leading to mistakes, even falsehoods, becoming entrenched as reality within the community.
And it's become clear that even systems founded with noble intentions can develop internal mechanisms and a hidden culture that prioritize self-preservation over the well-being and rights of members,
Creating a tragic situation where the very people the system was meant to serve feel marginalized, unheard, and vulnerable.
This leaves us with a final critical thought for you, the listener. Given the scriptural emphasis on justice, love, transparency, and the undeniable human tendency towards self-preservation and consolidating power, how can individuals and institutions truly ensure that authority is wielded with genuine accountability, ethical integrity, and a commitment to truth?
How can the wheat be effectively protected from the weeds within any hierarchical system?
It's a crucial question. It compels us to reflect deeply on that balance between loyalty to a group and the paramount imperative to uphold ethical principles and actively seek justice when things go wrong, regardless of who holds authority. Something to definitely think about.
Thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this complex and insightful journey. The computer simulation has presented a range of perspectives and scenarios that underscore the crucial need for transparency and accountability in any religious, governmental, or social system. While the journey may have had its repetitions and challenges, we hope it has inspired thought and conversation around these critical issues. As the adage goes, you are the reason we are here. Your engagement and critical thinking are vital for a better future. And with that, we bid you farewell. Thank you, dear listeners, for engaging with us on this vital topic. We hope our discussion has broadened your understanding and empathy for those who are navigating complex issues of transparency and accountability. As we part ways, may the supreme consciousness bring each of you peace and prosperity in all your endeavours. Till our next conversation, go well and take good care.